They say racism in America is a shadow, always there, even in the brightest light. But shadows don't just lurk, they strike. And when they do, they don't knock. They kick the damn door down. The handcuffs clicked so loud, it felt like the whole terminal stopped breathing. James Carter, a name synonymous with Wall Street success, a man who'd closed billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, now stood frozen under the sterile white glare of airport security lights. His crime? Having the wrong skin in the wrong place. James had flown enough miles to circle the earth dozens of times, and yet, in this moment, he felt like a stranger in his own country. The Afikara tall, broad-shouldered man with icy blue eyes kept his jaw tight, as if convinced that the polished man in front of him was hiding something dangerous behind that calm, expensive exterior. Around them, the air smelled faintly of coffee, perfume, and jet fuel, a cocktail of transients. The buzz of rolling luggage wheels and boarding announcements faded, replaced by a silence that was somehow louder than any noise. Travelers stared, mouths slightly open, phones in hand, some already recording. James's mind wasn't on the cameras, though. It was on his daughter, Maya, waiting at home in Chicago. She was only 12, but had already asked him once, "Daddy, why do people look at us different?" He'd brushed it off, told her the world was better now. But in this moment, with cold steel biting into his wrists, he felt like a liar. The officer's voice broke through his thoughts. "Sir, you match the description of a suspect in an ongoing investigation. We need you to come with us." James's brows furrowed. A suspect? In a three-piece suit, carrying a laptop full of stock reports? His tone was steady, but beneath it lay a storm. A woman in line, middle-aged, Latina, holding a toddler, spoke up. "I've been watching him the whole time. He didn't do anything." "Ma'am, please step aside," the officer said without even looking at her. From the corner of his eye, James saw another security guard approach, a younger one, maybe mid-20s, shifting uncomfortably. "Officer Daniels, I think." "Not now," Daniels snapped. James's breath was slow, deliberate. He'd learned long ago that losing his temper would only give them the excuse they were hunting for. But his heart rate betrayed him, pounding against his ribs like it was trying to escape. He had only seconds to decide whether to resist or comply. The wrong choice could mean headlines, or worse, his life. Then, just as Daniels started guiding him toward the side security room, James's phone, still in his inside suit pocket, began to ring. Daniels reached in, pulling it out like evidence. The caller ID flashed, U.S. Department of Justice. For a split second, Daniels's face shifted confusion, maybe even fear, but his grip didn't loosen. Around them, whispers rippled through the crowd. James met Daniels's gaze with an expression that could cut glass. "Answer it," he said. Daniels hesitated, then swiped to pick up. "This is Officer Daniels, TSA Security." A cold, authoritative voice came through the speaker. "Put Mr. Carter on the line. Now." You could hear a pin drop. The crowd leaned in, invisible but united, sensing they were witnessing something that would not end quietly. James took the phone, cuffs still on. "This is Carter." The voice on the other end was razor sharp. "James, I just got word you were detained. That officer doesn't know it yet, but he's about 30 seconds away from making the worst career mistake of his life." Daniels blinked, his grip finally slackening. The younger officer shifted from foot to foot, looking like he wanted to melt into the floor. "Mr. Carter," the voice continued, "stay calm. We're already pulling the footage. This is going to be resolved immediately." James didn't smile, didn't glow. Been here before. Not this exact scene, but the feeling was familiar. The humiliation, the silent calculation of everyone watching. Was he dangerous? Was he guilty? Or was he just another black man in America, waiting for the system to remember his humanity? The phone clicked off. Daniels cleared his throat, his voice now dripping with forced politeness. There's been a misunderstanding, sir." James turned slowly to face him. "No, there's been a pattern, and you just played your part perfectly." Murmurs in the crowd swelled. Phone stayed up, recording. This wasn't just an incident, it was about to be a moment. And James Carter knew exactly how to use it. James Carter knew exactly how to use it. He wasn't just a man with a reputation, was a man with a platform. And he understood something Daniels clearly didn't. In the age of social media, moments like this could ignite faster than wildfire. The cuffs were still on, clinking against each other with every subtle movement. Daniels fumbled for the key, his fingers stiff, his breathing uneven. The crowd wasn't just watching anymore, they were judging, silently sentencing him in the court of public opinion. James stood still, eyes steady on Daniels. "Go ahead," he said, voice calm but cutting. "Make sure the cameras get this part." Daniels swallowed hard. The younger officer badge reading Miller looked at James with something almost like an apology. Miller glanced at the crowd, then back at his superior. "Sir, maybe we should move him somewhere more private." "No," James interjected sharply. "We'll do this right here, in the open." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the onlookers. Someone near the back muttered, "Good for him." Another voice whispered, "This is going viral." Daniels' jaw flexed. He hated losing control of the narrative. But his hands were shaking now as he turned the key in the cuffs. The metallic click as they opened was almost as loud as when they'd locked. James rubbed his wrists, the faint red marks screaming louder than any words. A woman in a red coat stepped forward. She was holding her phone, the recording light blinking. "Sir, do you want me to send you the video? I got the whole thing." James gave her a small nod. "Please. And keep it safe." Daniels tried to speak, but James cut him off with a raised hand. "Don't. Not now. You had your chance to treat me like a man before you treated me like a suspect." The silence stretched. Somewhere in the distance, an announcement called passengers to a gate, but no one moved. The tension held them in place. Then James's phone rang again. This time, the screen read, "Attorney General's office." He answered without taking his eyes off Daniels. "Yes." The voice was brisk, urgent. "James, we've confirmed the identity of the real suspect. He's already in custody at another terminal. Your detainment was entirely unjustified, and the TSA director himself is preparing a public apology." A humorless smile touched James's lips. "That's not going to be enough. What do you need?" James's eyes swept the crowd. "I need this to mean something. I'm tired of apologies that vanish in tomorrow's news cycle. I want Daniels here, and every officer like him, to sit through mandatory bias training, real training, not some online checkbox nonsense. And I want the data on wrongful detainments by race made public." There was a pause. "James, that's going to stir things up." "Good," he said flatly. "Let it." When he hung up, the crowd seemed to lean in. He hadn't raised his voice once, yet everyone could feel the weight of what he was doing. This wasn't just about him, Anna Maria, it was about every black traveler who'd been stopped, searched, humiliated, and told it was procedure. Daniels shifted uncomfortably, clearly aware of the dozens of phones capturing his every flinch. James stepped closer, just enough so their voices would carry without shouting. "You thought this was about catching a suspect," James said, his tone low, deliberate. "But it was about power. And today, you lost yours." He turned away before Daniels could answer, moving toward the security checkpoint exit. The crowd parted for him like water around a stone, some patting him on the shoulder, others murmuring words of support. Halfway through, a teenage boy with curly hair and a skateboard under his arm stopped him. "Hey, my dad's black. Stuff like this happens to him all the time. Thanks for standing up." James gave him a small, tired smile. "Make sure you stand up too, kid, even when it's not you." The boy nodded, eyes wide with something between admiration and resolve. As James reached the end of the checkpoint, Miller caught up to him. "Mr. Carter, Sir Luke, I'm sorry. I didn't agree with what Daniels did, but it's complicated in there. You speak up, you get shut down." James studied the young officer for a moment. "Then maybe you're in the wrong line of work. Or maybe you're exactly the one who needs to change it." Miller's eyes dropped to the floor, but he nodded. "Yes, sir." By the time James stepped into the main concourse, the terminal noise came rushing back, the hum of conversations, the smell of cinnamon pretzels, the rhythmic clatter of suitcase wheels. But something felt different. People weren't just looking at him, they were looking for him, recognizing him from what had just unfolded minutes ago. Some smiled. Some lifted their phones, already typing. And James knew. By the time he landed in Chicago, the whole country would know too. By the time James boarded his flight, the incident was no longer just his. It had been uploaded to Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and God knows where else, under hashtags like Flying While Black and Justice for Carter. Each clip showed a slightly different angle, some shaky, some crystal clear, but all told the same story. A respected black businessman being handcuffed without cause, his dignity stripped in front of strangers. James sat in his first-class seat, the leather cool against his palms. He'd flown countless times before, but this flight felt heavier. The cabin crew gave him the polite, professional smiles they gave every passenger, but behind their eyes, he saw recognition. As the plane taxied, a man in the seat across the aisle leaned over. "Mr. Carter," he said quietly, "I saw what happened at security. I'm sorry. If there's anything I can do." James shook his head gently. "Just don't forget it happened. That's how this keeps going. People forget." The man nodded, his lips pressed tight. 2 hours into the flight, James's phone buzzed with notifications. His assistant, Rachel, had sent him a flurry of texts. CNN wants an interview tonight. MSNBC tomorrow morning. New York Times wants a statement ASAP. Public support is exploding. 2M views in 3 hours. James stared at the screen. This was the moment he could either let the system apologize and move on or turn it into a fight they couldn't ignore. He typed back, "Draft me a statement. I want it clear, direct, and uncomfortable. No sugarcoating." When the plane landed, the Chicago skyline glittered under the setting sun. But the terminal waiting area wasn't the quiet welcome he expected. It was swarming with reporters. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust forward. "Mr. Carter, do you believe this was racial profiling? Mr. Carter, are you considering legal action? Do you think TSA should fire the officer?" James raised a hand for silence, his voice carrying easily. "I believe what happened to me happens to thousands of people whose names you'll never hear. Yes, it was racial profiling. Yes, it was humiliating. But firing one man won't fix a system built on bias. This is about more than might. It's about every traveler who's been treated like a suspect for existing in their own skin." The cameras kept flashing. The crowd of travelers behind the reporters began to clap, slowly at first, then louder. Someone shouted, "Tell M. Carter." That night, James sat in a CNN studio under hot lights. The anchor, a woman with perfectly styled hair and a voice like smooth steel, got straight to it. "Mr. Carter, some people online are calling this an isolated incident. Others say it's proof of a systemic problem. Where do you stand?" James didn't blink. If this were isolated, we wouldn't have a hashtag. We wouldn't have millions of people sharing their own stories. This isn't about one bad officer. It's about a culture that trains people to see black men as threats first and humans second. The anchor leaned forward. "And what do you want to see happen?" "I want mandatory, in-person, comprehensive bias training for all TSA officers, reviewed annually. I want transparency in detention data broken down by race, gender, and reason. And I want the Department of Homeland Security to be held accountable when that data shows bias." The anchor arched an eyebrow. "That's ambitious." James met her gaze evenly. So was ending segregation. But people fought for it anyway. By morning, his interview had gone viral. Support poured in from celebrities, activists, and everyday travelers. But not everyone was on his side. His email was a war zone, half filled with messages of solidarity, half with threats and slurs. Rachel called him. "James, DHS has reached out. They want a private meeting tomorrow." James sighed. "They want to shut me up." "Probably, but you could use it." The next day, the meeting room inside the federal building was a cold, beige box. Across the table sat 3 officials in dark suits. At the head was Director Helen Briggs, a woman with sharp eyes and a voice that could cut glass. "Mr. Carter," she began, "we regret what happened to you. Officer Daniels will be disciplined, and TSA is committed to improving training." James held up a hand. "With respect, Director, I didn't come here for a PR statement. I came for commitments. Public commitments." Her jaw tightened. "We're prepared to release a statement." "No," James said, his tone steady but immovable. "You'll release the detention data, and you'll implement the training I proposed. Not 6 months from now. Not a year from now. Now." One of the men beside her leaned forward. "Mr. Carter, you're asking us to overhaul federal procedure based on a single incident." James locked eyes with him. "No, I'm asking you to overhaul it based on every incident you've ignored until one finally made the news." Silence filled the room. Briggs leaned back, studying him. "You understand the backlash this could create?" "I've lived the backlash my whole life," James replied. "The difference is, now you're the one who's going to feel it." By the time James left the building, reporters were waiting again. He stepped up to the microphones. We've begun discussions for real change. But this isn't over until it's in policy, not promises. Keep watching, keep recording, and keep holding them accountable." The crowd erupted in cheers. As he walked away, James knew the fight was far from won. But for the first time, the system wasn't just looking at him, they were listening. And that was a start. 3 weeks later, the fight had grown bigger than James ever imagined. It wasn't just travelers and activists, Anna Maria, it was lawyers, lawmakers, even a few TSA insiders stepping forward with leaked memos and testimony about racial profiling practices. The hashtag #FlyingWhileBlack had transformed into a full-blown movement, trending for 21 days straight. James had been on every major network, spoken at 2 rallies, and testified before a congressional subcommittee. His words, sharp, deliberate, undeniable, had been quoted in newspapers from New York to Nairobi. But with the spotlight came shadows. One morning, as he stepped out of his Chicago townhouse, a black SUV idled across the street. The driver wore sunglasses and didn't move. James felt the prickling awareness that he was being watched. Rachel had warned him about threats, emails telling him to go back where you came from, messages promising that he'd pay for ruining a good man's career. He'd learned to ignore most of it, but the SUV stayed for 3 days. On the 4th day, James received a call from Miller, the young officer from the airport. "Sir, we need to talk." In person. They met in a quiet diner on the south side. Miller looked tired, eyes darting to the door every few seconds. "It's bigger than you think," he said, voice low. "Daniels isn't just some rogue officer. He's part of an informal network inside TSA. They share intel, photos, descriptions of suspicious travelers. And by suspicious, they mean, well, people who look like you." James leaned back, his stomach tightening. "Are you telling me there's a list?" Miller nodded. "Unofficial, but it's there. I've seen it." James felt the old anger rising hot, electric. "I want it." Miller hesitated. "If I get caught." "You won't," James interrupted. "But if you do, you'll have the entire country on your side." Miller gave a short, bitter laugh. "I wouldn't bet on that, but I'll try." 3 nights later, Miller slid a flash drive across the table at another unmarked meeting. James plugged it into his laptop and scrolled. Dozens of names, photos, and notes. Most were black or brown. The reasons were flimsy: frequent flyer, expensive luggage, appeared nervous, looked out of place. James closed the laptop slowly. This is it. This is what they'll never be able to explain away. The next morning, James sent the files to a trusted investigative journalist. By noon, the story was everywhere. By evening, TSA headquarters was in full crisis mode, issuing a statement about unauthorized internal practices and promising a thorough review. But the public wasn't buying it. Protesters flooded major airports, peaceful but loud, holding signs that read, "I am not a suspect, and check your bias, not my skin." Congress announced emergency hearings. Director Briggs was called to testify. James sat in the front row that day, flanked by lawyers and activists. Briggs, under oath, admitted that elements of bias had been uncovered within certain TSA units. The room buzzed with outrage. Then came the moment James had been waiting for. The committee chair turned to him. "Mr. Carter, do you believe TSA can fix itself?" James took a deep breath. "No," he said plainly. "Not without oversight from outside this room. We cannot trust the fox to guard the hen house. This isn't about reform, it's about transformation." Applause erupted from the gallery. The chair banged the gavel for order, but the sound didn't die down quickly. That night, the president addressed the nation. For the first time, racial profiling in transportation security was acknowledged as a systemic problem requiring legislative action. A bill dubbed the Carter Act was introduced to mandate independent oversight, public reporting of detention statistics, and comprehensive bias training for all federal security personnel. It passed the House in 2 weeks. Months later, James found himself back in the same airport where it all began. He stood in the security line, a quiet observer this time. The officers were different, diverse, attentive, professional. Travelers moved through without the sharp edge of fear he'd come to recognize over the years. As he placed his briefcase on the conveyor belt, an Afikara black woman with warm eyes smiled. "Mr. Carter, it's an honor. What you did, it changed things." James gave a small smile. "We changed things. All of us." She waved him through. No extra questions. No sideways glances. Outside the terminal, The evening sun spilled gold across the runway. James paused, breathing in the airjet fuel, coffee, the faint hum of engines. For the first time in a long time, the airport didn't feel like a battlefield. He knew the fight wasn't over. Bias didn't vanish overnight. But now, the rules had changed. And so had the people enforcing them. As he walked toward his gate, his phone buzzed with a message from Maya. "Daddy, saw the news." "You did it." James typed back. "No, baby. We started it." And with that, he boarded his flight. The shadow of racism still out there, but weaker, smaller, because one day, in one airport, he'd refused to let it win. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.